My name is Risa Hernandez, and my policy is over the Child Abuse and Prevention Treatment Act of 1974. To introduce this policy, we have to ask what the Child Abuse and Prevention Treatment Act is for. It was sponsored by Richard Nixon and Gerald Ford, and it is the legislation that provided federal funds to states to develop reporting systems for investigations of abuse and neglect. This act was historical because it was the first time any attention was brought to child protective services. The original legislation's main goal was to provide funding for the prevention, identification, and treatment of child abuse. The prevention basically asks how can abuse be prevented. There's the identification, which trains the CPS workers on what are the signs of abuse. And then there's the treatment, which is how can we constantly improve the treatment for abuse victims. The Act also created two types of grant programs. One of those was the federal grant program, which is the basic grants to states to support new prevention, assessment, investigation, prosecution, and treatment activities. And then there's the demonstration, which is grants to public agencies and nonprofit organizations, including Indian tribes and tribal organizations, to pilot and test innovations and to train state personnel. Over the past 4 decades, the policy was officially revised in December of 2010. It was called the Reauthorization Act, and it states, authorize grants to states to increase adoption of foster care children if grantees could describe how they plan to improve the placement rate of children into permanent homes, intend to improve the placement of older children, minority children, and children with special needs, will evaluate program effectiveness, and how they will coordinate activities with other services providers. CAPTA's main goal was to better shape the way for who becomes responsible for child abuse. So it shifted the blame on just being on the parents, and it kind of made it everyone's issue so that children of abuse could be better cared for. They put the power mostly for the state so that they could intervene if there was any neglect, physical or sexual abuse. Although there is a lot of funding to prevent child abuse, there is still, unfortunately, many cases still of child abuse. Statistics as of 2015 had showed that there are 700,000 cases throughout the United States each year that are confirmed, but CPS still intervenes with about 3.4 million families who have reported abuse. Texas alone has 65,000 cases of confirmed child abuse each year. The common misconception is that child maltreatment is only in poverty-stricken neighborhoods, which there is a higher risk, but that's not a causal factor. The CAPTA policy, however, allows for the state to intervene and find adequate care for these children. If there was no solution to the policy, or even if the policy received less funding, more children could be at risk for staying in abusive and neglectful homes. I couldn't really think of any latent goals, but the manifest goals would be to increase identification, reporting, and investigation of abuse to further prevent the child from further harm, to train caseworkers on how to properly identify and report abuse, and to implement laws to further protect children from being harmed. There are several benefits to this policy, but just to list a few, it is mandated now that there's state funding for child protection programs. The funding allows children to be removed from inadequate care, and there is proper treatment that is provided to those children that have already been abused.